Hello, welcome to this quick tutorial on how to use Unity 3D components, well 2D components I would say, to create basic Walkcycle. Now I had looked around on the internet a little bit and I found a lot of intro to Unity 2D stuff and some things that had mentioned doing some animation within Unity 3D, but no really clear walkthroughs on how to get it from a general picture, say, within Adobe Photoshop into an actual animated piece. So through playing around and doing different things, I figured it out. So obviously, I'm no animator per se, but let's go ahead and load up the project that I'm working with currently. I'm working on a jam piece within Unity 3D for NES Jam, and I've created some characters. Now the character we're specifically going to be looking at is what I call Customer 1. So he's pretty much a really basic pixel art piece. Obviously, if you have more skills than my programmer based pixel art, you're going to have a better time at doing this. So basically the first place that I started out is I said, well, I really want to get this piece animated within Unity 3D, but I don't really want to create a sprite sheet with all the different animations. I'd like to try to use the internal workings of what is Unity 3D and animating the individual pieces. So the first thing I did is I converted this over into like a single image. So I copied this and I did a new document. Now the new document is going to have a little bit of different dimensions to it. So let me show you that. So I increased the width and the height a little bit to handle creating the sheet around the individual. So I did a 17 by 22. Okay, so we do new image 17 by 22 and we go good. We'll zoom in here and that'll be enough space for us to have the man come in. So we'll copy this guy and come in here. Now you could see we're cutting off some of the legs and different aspects of him, but that's perfectly fine. What we want to do is we want to create a interface so that we can use the individual elements alone. Okay, so we're going to leave the body the way it is, but what we want to do is we want to get the individual components out of here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select upon the eyes, cut them out, paste them. That's going to create a new layer for me, and I can actually remove one of the eyes because we can basically use two of the eyes at the same time. Now I could actually fill my background with a color that I know I'm not going to be using, so we know that there's something on the palette. So you could see the eyes right there, and you could also see that our faces now has empty spaces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the square tool and I'm going to minify it all the way down to 1 pixel, and then I'm going to select the pencil brush, and I actually want to go down further below that. Okay, so now I have the basic face, the basic body. I also want to take off the arm, so you can copy cut that out, paste it. Now it's on its own layer. I can redefine that body element, just going back to it and coloring it back in with its color. And there we go. So basically we're just taking the individual elements off that we want to work with and getting them transparent with the background so that they can be worked with individually within the environment. Now the last thing we need to do, or actually second to last thing, is we need to delete out the other piece of the arm because we don't need that. We'll be using the same piece of the arm for that. And then we need to move the body up to get the legs. Okay, we're going to have a left leg and a right leg because they're a little bit different. And right leg, so I'm going to just do a marquee around the other leg. Copy. Didn't get the full thing. So let's try that marquee again. Cutting, pasting, creating a new layer automatically. Move the body back down here, and there you go. You have essentially the body, the eyeball, the arms, and the legs. And that's essentially what we need to bring it over to our project. So what we do now is we save this out, and we'll do a save for web and devices. And we're going to save this out to a PNG 24. So this will allow our transparency to go through. But before we do that, we want to delete out our background layer so it's fully transparent. Save for web and devices, PNG 24, and we're good to go. We're going to save this as man1. Okay? So let's cancel out of that. I've already got that done, but that's essentially how you build out the individual file. You just separate the elements that you may want to animate in the future. Now, in this tutorial, I'm not going to animate the eyeball. I'm just going to insert them into above the head, and then I'm going to have the arms and the legs animated. So close out of here. So we have our one character pretty much ready for animation within Unity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new Unity project. So I'm going to create this new Unity project as a 2D. I'm not going to add any of the default assets, and we're just going to hit create, and I'm going to call this man animate. Alright, I've resized my environment a little bit. Let me do a little bit more work here in trying to bring this down, make it usable in a smaller format. Now, so what we do is we have our main camera here. We could go to our game view. There's nothing special about it, just centered on our little environment. So the first thing I want to do is I want to bring in that PNG for the game. So I'm going to move that to here. Open this in a viewer so you could view it real fast. So here's our PNG with the transparent background with a single eyeball. So I can basically drag and drop this into my assets folder. Let's go ahead and create a new folder. We'll call it Sprite Sheets. And then I'll bring in that man1. So we have that man1 as we looked at before. Now the one thing you do want to make sure that is done before you import this is actually change this to point filter mode, because a pixel-based character will render all blurry unless you do that. Now the other thing you need to do is you need to select the sprite mode to multiple, and then go into the sprite editor, and this will bring up the sprite editor, and you can actually hit slice and see where it gives you the slicing on the guy itself. Now it's kind of tough to work with in such a small window, but I believe I can do it. So all I'm going to do when I slice this, basically it sliced together the eyeball and the body, and I don't want that. I just want the body in one and then the eyeball in another. So I could call this man underscore body. And we also could do a head here. So let's go ahead and just cut off the head. Cut off the head! Why don't ya? So there's the body. Let's create a new sprite for the head. It's really easy to do this within the editor. So we're going to get man body. And let's do this a little bit more figurative on our level. So instead of man, I'm going to actually enter customer 1 body. And I could actually reduce this to the size of however we want the size of that to be. Okay, so we have customer 1 underscore as our naming scheme. And so I'll do customer 1 underscore head. Let's create one for the eyeball. For the arm. We'll call this leg 1. And the final one we'll call leg 2. And so if we click on them all, they should have customer 1 and then whatever type of object it is. And we can hit apply, and then we go back. From there, we can actually start dropping our character onto the scene. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create an empty game object that is going to hold our customer 1. And then within this, we're going to actually drop all of our sprites. So we can just do that. We don't want to create a new animation, so what we'll do is we'll just drop them individually onto the stage. Because if you grab a bunch of sprites and drop them off at once, essentially what it's thinking is you want to create a new animation with it, which we don't. We want to use the internal animation of the suite to do this. Now these are little dots, you don't need to worry about that. All you really need to worry about is centering them within the environment. So we're going to do 0 and 0 on the X and Y values for the position. And then we'll go ahead and zoom in here, and you can see all of my objects are essentially on top of each other. So I could actually separate these out and start to see, okay, so I have my body, I have my arm, and they gain the order essentially of however you drop them into the environment. So in this case, we want the body, the legs. It really doesn't matter what order they're on the scale, but one thing that does matter a bunch within this environment is the order of the arms as well as the eyeballs. So if I go in here and I put this on top of my sprite, you can see it disappears. That's because all of these come in with a default order layer of 0. So this one I'm actually going to give 1. Same with the arm. I'm going to give a 1. That way when I place it on top of my sprite, the item on top of the sprite, it won't be lost. Now in this case, I actually want to put these guys within the head. So let me go ahead and move the eye in the head. And then I'm going to duplicate the eye and make another one, so there's 2. Just move this around a little bit. So when we talk about animating items within Unity, we can animate the individual's item. So since the eyes are actually nested within the head here, any animation that we do with the head, the eyes are going to be affected by it. And that's exactly what we want to do. Now, in the future, I expect to do some animation on the eyes themselves, possibly doing blinks or something like that, but not really worried about that at this point. So at this point, let's scroll down here a little bit, get this guy kind of centered. We can actually come in here and kind of level the playing field a little bit. And that's essentially the sprite that we had before. Now let's go ahead and duplicate this arm. But we want this arm to be in the back. Okay, so we're going to have to give this a negative order. So if we do -1, then it's behind the 0. So this is order in layer 0. We give this arm a -1, and we could rename this arm 2. And there you go. We have 2 arms using the same sprite, and we can even transform this and rescale it a little bit, maybe make it a little bit smaller, but that's not really important to me at this point. So when I got actually into the animation part, so let's go ahead and save the scene out. I'm going to save it as character basic, and there we go. Have a basic character scene, and then we have all of our sprites within the scene so far, but we want to actually make sure that these are nested within the customer one. So let's go ahead and do that. So there'll actually be a tab space next to them as long as they're within customer one. So customer one itself can now move and be animated as a whole. Okay. So if I bring down the animation window and I dock it down here, you get a lot more availability on using different things. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we have our customer one selected. We're going to hit add curve, and this is going to have us save this animation out. So we're going to do walk animation. And so here, once you do a walk animation within the customer, you can see when I go to add curve here, it gives me a lot of options for things that are essentially contained within the object that I have selected. So I have my arm, both my arms, my head, and my legs. Now the ability here is essentially to manipulate these objects in different ways. So if we wanted to, say, move the arm or a leg in a certain way, we can do that. One thing I also want to note is rotation. Now there's a rotation mark or a center position on essentially where the joint is contained within the object. Now in this case, the joint is in the middle, and that's the default location for any object that you bring into the environment. But if you want to be able to bend on, say, a bone, you actually want to go ahead and edit those points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to my project, come back to my sprite sheets, and select my man one and go into the sprite editor again. And instead of using these default positions, I'm going to move these into general positions that are accurate for, say, a shoulder or a arm joint. And same with the legs. I'm going to be able to rotate them on their kneecap. So I may move this window over so I can get to that. So we want to be able to rotate on those joints, and we can even make one that he's able to rotate on, say, his neck, and be able to do that. And if we hit apply and then exit, sometimes when you change these positionings, it can mess things up a little bit, so it's good to do that before you get into any type of animation. Your center points are going to kind of construe where these start at. Alright. So we got our center points at an accurate position. Now what we want to do is we want to come in here and actually start the animation. So let me get my legs lined up here good. And now we can start doing that. So we have our starting position here essentially of where we want our character to be. And there's no animation currently. And the way animation works is based upon a sample. So it's basically a a millisecond sample that goes through the timeline, and you could add different points in which you want to animate something. So say I want to actually animate. Now, one other thing to note is the animation here. Let me change this eye up here and dock that. Okay. Now, animation within this window is handled differently based upon the different types of animation you want to do. Now, there is a animation that is, say, a rotation, and then there's a transform or resize animation. So there's different things you can do to affect different things in different ways. So let's go ahead and create an animation, say 1 second out here, that's going to rotate this arm. And we currently have positions entered within here, so that we have our starting position. Now, I could come in here and rotate an arm and see how it's actually rotating on where that bone or that center point was. So we can create an animation based upon that position. Now, you can see once we start that rotation, another element is added to the customer arm. We have a position, and then we have a rotation. And these are going to enter based upon what you want to actually animate. So let's go ahead and do the arm 2. And we'll just animate this back here a little bit so that we lose position of it. So we can actually come in here and drag along this timeline, and that's essentially how we animate basic objects within this environment. So we can actually take the head and move it down a little bit. Now this is the starting position because we're at the starting point. What we want to do is we want to go to, say, the midpoint of where we want our animation at, and then adjust it a little bit. So maybe I want my head down a little bit, maybe I want it a little off center or rotated. I can move that on the next keyframe, wherever the next keyframe is. So it does the type of animation that is stated on the left hand side, and it targets the next animation, and it rotates itself in whatever direction or moves itself in whatever directions you may intend to go. Same with the legs. We can go with the legs to a center position. Maybe this will rotate forward, and maybe this one will rotate backwards. And see, our keyframes right now are on the position within the timeline that we want to basically animate at. If it's here, we're going to animate the start position or change the starting position. Wherever this red line is, that's essentially what you're editing. So you could hit the position, grab the object, or select it within this menu structure. Either way will work. You just need to remember, wherever this keyframe line is, that is what you're animating. So right now we've animated the head, we moved it a little bit, we've animated the arm, we've animated the legs, and we pretty much have the basic animation that we want to have. Now, if we play this, just hit play down here, you can see it's halfway through its cycle. Now we could go through here and do a lot more work on this animation, but this tutorial is basically just to get you moving, okay? So what we'll do is we'll just create some new keyframes here, and we're going to just go ahead and select all these starting keyframes. If you select the keyframe on the top, it'll select all of them, so I'm going to hit copy, and I'm going to go out to 2 and paste that. So what that's going to do, that's going to copy all of our starting positions out to that point in time. That way, on the middle frame, it'll actually start coming back to our original state, so we have a seamless animation. So if I hit play, you can see it's doing the animation, going back to the starting point, and then continuing on. So if I hit stop on this, and then go back to our game scene. Now, one thing we want to do is we also want to zoom in on our character a little bit. So let's zoom out here and grab our camera. Alright, so here's our final little guy. He's been animated within this keyframe cycle from start to finish. We press play, and there he is. Now you can mess with the speed of this based upon the sample cycle here. You could actually enter a larger value if you want it to go faster. So if we go 90 here, it's actually going to go quicker. And obviously you could add a lot more effects and stuff within the environment, but that's the basic of the animation. So hopefully that helps, and that'd be good. Alright, take care.